That's your spot. Yeah, that's your spot. I can't sit there. Hey everybody, so today we're painting some reptisaurians. This is an expansion for Massive Darkness. Massive Darkness is a dungeon crawl game. It's sort of like it's a loot crawl, like D&D kind of light. Like if you had friends that were like board game people, and you wanted to kind of like give them some kind of like entryway thing into D&D, you know, like try this and see if you like it. This would probably be a good game for them, and it comes with a ton of minis. This expansion comes with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think about 20. I think there's about 20 minis in here, and they're cheap. Like these expansions, I think they're like $25. So it works out to be like a little bit over $1 a mini, and you get a ton of minis. And I've been using them in my game, in my D&D game, as dragonborn. Also in another game where I'm a player character, I have a character who is a lizard man, and he has a blowgun, and he made a blowgun out of the bones of his enemies, and he likes to make darts out of the bones of his enemies. That's one of the things that lizard folk can do. So yeah, and then these guys all have, the ranged guys all have blowguns. So they have swords and blowguns. So yeah, fun, really gorgeous looking minis too. So I'm gonna paint them like Dragonborn too. I'm gonna do, you know, like pretty much all the popular kinds, like acid, the blue, red, and you know, like green, red, blue, kind of like popular Dragonborn colors too, because I'm going to use them as Dragonborn and lizard folk and any kind of giant lizard person in my D&D games. But yeah, we're gonna not paint the car art today. We're gonna do something original. So first off, I've already done a zenithal prime on these guys, and I'm not really going to get too into how I do a zenithal prime, because I've already done a really exhaustive video about how I do my zenithal, how I prep my minis for painting. So I'm not going to really get into that too much here, but just know that I've done that already when I start doing the ink glazes. So first off, we're going to start with some ink glazes, and I'm using Vallejo Game ink. I think that you could probably use contrast paints to do this, but these are just going to be a densely kind of pigmented wash, and the zenithal prime is going to create those natural highlights and shadows, and it's going to let us just sort of add some color to that grayscale paint job that we've already done with the zenithal prime, and then we can go from there. It's going to be a jumping off point for the rest of the painting, and it's going to create like a roadmap of where those light and shadows belong on the miniatures. Like for instance, if I have a spot on the miniature that's actually black, I'm not going to change that at all. I'm going to leave it black, because that's going to be the darkest shadows on the miniature, and I'm just going to leave it like that. I want those shadows to stay super dark, and all I really want to do is tint the lighter colors. I want to put some tone on the miniature to work from. And since I'm going to be using these guys as my Dragonborn in D&D, I want them to be different colors. There's different colors of dragons in D&D, and Dragonborn are, oh geez, I'm not sure on the lore of this, on why they're like people, like this, one of their ancestors had sex with a dragon or something, but the green Dragonborn are going to have geez, acid. I think that they're going to have like an acid breath weapon. Red dragonborn are going to have fire, and then like white is like lightning. Bronze dragon is going to be lightning, so on and so forth. So yeah, I want these guys to be colorful, and I don't want there's multiple sculpts of the same model, and that's one of the things that I actually like about buying board game sets, is that you get lots and lots of the same sculpts, and then you can just paint them up differently to make them look different. But yeah, we're gonna paint these guys to make them look like different types of dragonborn, and I'm also gonna do some things with their capes, their cloaks and stuff, and some of them are gonna be have like leather armor, and then some of them are gonna have kind of cloth armor, and I'm gonna do some different things with the different minis. Also, one of these guys is going to be my player character, Salfesta, or Salt for short, is what we call him. And I typically do spend a little bit more time on my player characters. It seems to make them last longer in my games. So yeah, I mean, I show a sense of pride in my player characters, like painting up characters that I might play, for 6 months or more. I tend to do a good paint job on them. So one of these guys is going to be Salt, and we're just going to pick the prettiest one, and he's probably going to have a blowgun too. And something that I'm doing right here is I'm actually cleaning up where I've colored outside of the lines with my paint job. You can use like a little Q-tip. I'm using like a hobby Q-tip. But when you're doing these kind of ink wash things, neatness counts, because when you mess up and then you paint something the wrong color, it takes a little bit more cleanup to get it back to where you had it before, where you've already got your lights and darks and shadows and all that, and some natural shading put in there. So I am doing my best to kind of keep it in the lines when I paint this way, because we're actually doing like sort of an additive paint process. We're like more like a watercolor kind of process to begin with. So now I'm going to start to go to work on the leather, and I'm going to start to use some actual paint to do this, and but I'm using Vallejo Model Air, and so the Vallejo Model Air is going to be like the game inks, and I'm actually I'm going to mix some game ink in there too to kind of bump down the opacity a little bit. But the Vallejo Model Air is not going to be as opaque. It's going to be thinner. It's going to be runnier because it's designed to go through an airbrush, and then it's also not going to be quite as opaque as like model color or game color. So in my experience, it goes the washes, the game inks, the Vallejo Model Air, Vallejo Model Color. But when I paint minis this way, after I'm done with the like wet blending of the Model Air onto leather and stuff like that, I'm done. I'm usually really happy with how the leather looks by the time I'm done wet blending the different Model Air colors onto leather. So it's a pretty easy, kind of efficient way to paint leather, in my opinion, is to do the Vallejo Model Air over the Zenithal paint job. It looks really good when you're done. But the whole time I'm using the Zenithal Prime to sort of tell me where the darks and the lights belong, and then I'm trying to sort of pin wash darker colors into the shadows, and then keep my my lighter leather on the places that are getting more sunshine, if that makes sense. So I am painting and I am wet blending, but I'm still glazing at the same time. It's not totally opaque, it's not totally transparent, it's a little bit of both. But by the time that we're done doing the wet blending, that's pretty much it. Pretty much done. maybe a little bit of dry brushing. And because one of my dragonborn is kind of brown already, and I didn't want him to just be like totally brown, I decided to try to paint one of them with a cloak that was kind of like a dirty kind of linen look. But again, I'm still doing the same thing. I'm just using, I'm still using Vallejo model air, but I'm doing like a cloth instead of a leather. But I'm gonna do the same kind of wet blending thing over the Zenithal Prime, and not completely opaque, not completely transparent, a little bit of both. And I eventually decided that I wanted to make somebody look a little bit like the card art. This guy is probably going to be Salt, I'm pretty sure. He has this nice purple cape, and I think that he's also in the game in Massive Darkness. I think that he's some kind of an elite troop. And I'm not going to paint gold armor. I will never paint gold armor. It is never going to happen. You can quote me on that. If I ever actually paint gold armor on a mini, it's just like it's never going to happen. So this guy, he is going to get his purple cloak, and then I am going to kind of steal a little bit of the kind of card art, his concept art paint job, and use that on him, but yeah, he's gonna look a little bit like that, but he's also gonna look like an original character. But I actually really like how this guy, well, we're calling him Salt from now on. I really like how he turned out, specifically because he has the cape, you know, his cloak that is a color, and then he has his like tool belt, you know, his like fanny pack thing that is leather, and then his armor. I ended up doing like an iron, kind of like a dark gray kind of metallic metal iron. So to start with, to make the iron, I'm gonna mix some more Vallejo game ink, and then I'm gonna mix that with some game wash. So all I want to do is I just want to bump down the opacity. I want to make I want this to be a dark wash to make the iron, but I don't want to totally make everything look black. So in my experience, you just kind of have to play with this a little bit, but to get like a dark shade to make like an iron, you want it to be about 50-50 game ink and game wash. So mix a little bit, like half and half game ink and game wash black, and then you get a nice base for an iron kind of metallic metal. And I also went over these guys, they're like obsidian kind of sword things, and then put a little bit of this same kind of wash onto their bases as well to bring out the texture of the gravel stuff that I put on their bases. And now I'm gonna do some dry brushing over these basically just glazes on the Zenithal Prime to make those highlights pop out. And I'm using a mix of some P3 paints and some Citadel paints, but you know, they're in the paint pots, and then I'm gonna use a flat just a flat brush, and do dry brushing. I'm going to take most of the paint off, and then I'm going to wipe it on my hand until I'm picking up the ridges of my hand, and then I'm just going to dry brush over those guys to create those highlights. And this is going to be opaque paint. That's going to get rid of the kind of coffee staining look of the ink washes, and then it's also going to kind of solidify those highlights. But I'm going to leave my blacks in from like my darkest shadows from my Zenithal Prime on the miniature at all times. I'm not going to mess with those at all. I'm going to leave those nice and dark and black, and then I'm just going to make my highlights pop out a little bit more. And by the time I'm done doing the dry brushing, they're totally table ready. I mean, they're ready to go. But this is a good jumping off point to do a better paint job, an even better paint job after that too. And make sure that when you're dry brushing, you don't have to destroy your brushes to dry brush. You don't have to like just grind them into the paper towel and take every last little bit of paint off and then wipe it a little bit and then load it up with paint again and then take all the paint off. Just use a light touch. Just go easy with it. And yeah, you don't need to destroy your brushes. You don't need to take all the paint off. It's all about just being gentle and doing multiple passes of a very light touch with the dry brush, and then go in the direction of the detail that you want to pick up with the brush. In other words, go from your lightest areas to your stop at your darkest areas. Like start at your lightest areas, put a little bit on there, and then just stop when you start to get to where those shadows are on the models. And I'm going to do some dry brushing on these guys' cloaks too, on their leather, to make those kind of like broken leather, to make the tops of the where they're getting the most light kind of pop out and all that. But mostly after I finish doing the wet blending with the Model Air, they're done. You know, they're great. But that little bit of dry brushing is just going to really make that paint job pop out and give it a little bit of extra contrast, which is, you know, it's a good thing when you're looking at little dudes from a ways away. You want things to stand out and make all those details from the sculpt pop out. And I'm going to slowly work my way up to my very lightest lights on the models and dry brush in those colors. But I can't stress enough how helpful it is to have the Zenithal coat from the airbrush to kind of work from, just as a roadmap, just to tell you where those lights and darks belong when you're putting actual color on the model. It just makes such a huge difference to have those kind of natural looking shadows in place, and it just really helps to kind of sell the paint job and just make it that much more kind of realistic looking, even if you're going for like a kind of cartoony, like cell shaded look. And after I'm done doing my lightest highlights, now I'm going to do my metallic metals. Because, well, for one thing, I don't want to contaminate the other paints. A lot of times when I'm doing dry brushing and I'm using the flat, I'll just, I won't even wash it out that much. And then there's a chance of like contaminating the other paints as you go on, so you get those little kind of metal flakes into the other colors. So I want to do that last so that I don't get metal flakes into my greens and blues and leathers and all that. So, and then yeah, I'm just gonna dry brush on some metallic metal onto the shiny parts of the armor. And again, I'm just going to leave the recesses black, and then I'm going to put the shiny parts, the actual reflective metallic parts, on the very highest highlights of those armor and weapons and all that to pick up the glinty reflective metal in the light. Here you can see a close-up of what Salt is looking like up to this point. I'm going to keep working on him later. So here's how everybody looks after doing just some washes and a little bit of dry brushing, kind of edge highlighting, a little bit of wet blending on these guys. Not much. I mean, pretty quick paint job. These guys came together really quickly. And I am going to keep working on Salt a little bit, just because he's my player character. So I'm just going to give him an extra, I'm going to keep going a little bit further with him, and I'm going to black the bases on these guys too. So I'm going to use some P3 Thamar black. It's a nice kind of like really dark matte black color. I like it. I like using it for bases and things like that. I don't use it for a whole lot of other things else. I mean, there's not a lot of times when I want things to be completely black on a model. Like, it makes it look like a hole, like a black hole. But it's definitely nice for bases. And now to keep going on Salt, I'm actually going to break out the wet palette, and I'm going to do a little bit of wet blending. And so what I have here is I have some of the purple Vallejo game ink that I was using, and then I also have a model color purple, and it's a slightly lighter shade. So again, these are not completely opaque. I'm kind of going over some of the black spots on this guy, and I know that I said earlier that I wasn't really going to change things that were black. I was just going to leave them black and then have that be my natural highlights, or sorry, my natural shadows on the model. But like I said, when you have black parts on your model, it makes it look like it's a hole. It makes it look like it keeps going further back, like a cave or something. So I also want to get rid of some of like the coffee staining kind of look of the ink washes. So I'm just gonna go over Salt, and I'm gonna use the Zenithal Prime as a roadmap of where those highlights belong and where the shadows belong, and then I'm gonna keep developing those. I'm just gonna use the wet palette to kind of add a little bit of contrast, add a little bit of saturation. I'm going to bump up the saturation of those colors. I'm going to get rid of the coffee staining, and then I'm also going to just kind of develop those colors a little bit more. And I decided to work on his leathers a little bit more, but just looking at him right now, he doesn't need it at all. Like the step with the Model Air colors, doing the wet blending with the Model Air colors, it looks great on him right now. There is one little spot on his leg where some of the purple kind of washed over onto his leg, where it needs a little bit of cleanup, but otherwise, as far as edge highlighting goes, it doesn't really need it. He's got plenty of contrast and development of his leather, and but yeah, it does make it stand out a little bit more. It creates some more interest, some more highlights. It doesn't really need it though. But I think that also an important part of doing this is knowing when to stop. When your guy looks good and you can stop and not taking it to some kind of ridiculous end. But yeah, I really like him. I think he looks awesome, so I'm super happy with the paint job. So anyways, yeah, that's the finished paint job. That's gonna be it, you guys. I know I always say that. I know I always say take care of yourselves and, you know, clean your belly button lint and brush your teeth and all that. But I mean, seriously, be safe out there, you guys. Like here in Colorado, they've shut down all restaurants and bars and the schools, like sporting events, like everything. Pretty much everybody is self-quarantining right now. And you know, it's crazy. Like, go to the grocery stores and the shelves being picked clean, and these are crazy times. So I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna be working through my pile of shame, painting minis in my basement. You know, to keep from going crazy. So, anyways, thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Welcome to all my new subscribers. Yeah, thanks for watching. Peace.